Welcome back. Good news. Final one for Missy Berg for a little bit. It's been a lot of weeks in a row. This is the final session in this series. This is a little bit different than the 5-week video series that we were doing. This is kind of a summary from me. You know where I like to start. I like to start with that homework. And it was nice. I was just talking to Mike about kind of the reason for that. I am never picking on you if you don't do it. I just know me. And if I don't go use what I learn, it was a great 45 minutes, but then out of sight, out of mind, nothing changes. So you obviously know you're not in trouble if you don't do it. But wondering if last week we talked about those 4 pieces of the blessing. We talked about speaking the blessing, believing it, being it, and celebrating it. Anybody try anything, discuss anything they were going to try? This is just like going into a high school classroom. Anyone? How about just in general with this series? Any thoughts, comments, any of these? You know, there's 5 different weeks. Anything that you guys as a couple reflected on? Anything you're like, oh my gosh, now I know what Jim Burns was talking about. Like anything at all come up? I'll share something. Oh yeah, good.
Well, I think we skipped last week, so sorry.
Skip makes it sound like it was intentional.
It was.
Jill!
It was, sorry. We had 1 hour, we had to choose. But it's made us think, like, our kids are getting to the point where they're really noticing what we're doing and asking, like, why can you do that and I can't? And so I think for me, it's
Sorry.
Meet Dr. Berry.
We gotta be in the room, sorry.
it's made me like more reflective of what, you know, like how they see me. So we started putting our phones to bed and leaving them downstairs. I always use my phone as my alarm clock, as did he. But now we have a very beautiful alarm clock in our bedroom.
How much
And
did
then-
it cost you?
It was $14.99 because it does do daylight savings time. It's dimmable. You can change that.
It does daylight savings time, but this morning when it said 6:12 and I got up, I got downstairs and it was actually 5:12. So it does not do daylight savings time well.
You have to like hit the button to make it work. So, but we started doing that, and then just other things of like, okay, this is how our kids see us, and they're starting to ask questions of like, why can you do this and I can't? And I'm like, well, maybe I shouldn't be doing that, you know. So.
And reflecting on
I think there's nothing, I'm assuming that this kind of is for everybody else too. I don't think there's anything that either he or you or any one of the rest of us have said that is like, oh my gosh, I've never thought about that before. But rather, it's like good reminders, regardless of the season of life that you're in. Like this is one that we could rerun in 5 or 6 years, and for all of us that have kids, it's gonna probably mean a little bit different because, you know, I forget all the B or C words or whatever it is. Like, I'm not gonna be a controller anymore. I'm gonna be a whatever, consultant or something like that. You guys know what I'm talking about, whatever that was in the stages of life. And so, yeah, I just think, like Jill said, it's you know, kind of called us out on a few things perhaps that we have done that, you know, you try to change, but also just like reflect. So, yeah.
And that's what, like, Mike and I were talking a little bit before this class about, like, parenting. You know, when will you feel the most confident? When you get through that stage, and then when you get through that stage, and then that stage, and then, oh, wait a minute, I'm never going back to that stage, so great, that's really useful for me. I think a big piece, and I'll talk about this a little bit at the end, but again, is back to the power of that village. Be friends. Have people in your village that are 5 years older than you, 5 years younger than you, because that's where we get to kind of swap out these notes. Mentorship is very important. Anything else over the 5 weeks? One thing I know, yeah, Chris.
I think I've just had moments during the weeks where I catch myself in a situation or just out of a situation, and it's just, I'm thinking, you know, oh, hey, I remember that thing we talked about on Sunday. Like, it's good to have that voice in my head. It makes me maybe more confident, or at least more prepared for whatever.
And like you said a few weeks ago, look at the buzz of our life. You know, we don't get enough time in our day to take it, to kind of talk through. I think one of the best things about a series like this is talking things out, not even necessarily the video, but just creating that time in our day. Even if we're not talking, hopefully you're absorbing and thinking about, and then later on my drive or when I'm with my kid, I think about it. But being intentional, finding that time to reflect. 2 weeks ago, we did the kind of morals and values one, and one of the things under the tech time, it did bring up, there's a website that ever since my oldest daughter first got a phone, I subscribed to called Common Sense Media. It has great research, it has great, like, why do you get to do it mommy and not me kind of things. And this morning, literally, the subject header that came through was, subject line was movies that show why doing the right thing still matters. And they were movies that inspired integrity, and it just gave you like 20 different movies, depending on how old your kids were, even older kids. But just, back to the point of like stopping to think about it, make sure the people you are listening to, the apps you have, there is this information out there, and then it helped me stop and reflect for a second. I found one that I would like to watch. But that was just a great one, kind of talking about morals and values and things. Okay, so this week, this is just top 10 phrases to live and raise kids by Missy Berg. This is not a research-oriented thing. I think one of the things, I have been a parent for 23 years, and I've been a licensed clinical professional counselor for even longer than that. And I do feel very grateful every day. I know being a parent makes me a better counselor, and I also know being a counselor makes me a better parent. And so I feel very fortunate that mine two intertwine all day, every day. And so what I'm going to go through here is just kind of that 25 years of experience. I need to, kind of like a couple weeks ago, I said thank you to Michelle. What I'm going to go through might not fit for you. This is not an expert. This is just Missy Berg. And so when I go through these phrases, my hope for you guys is that you do interrupt me, that you question, that you give examples, that maybe you reinforce. But I don't love a 45-minute series where I'm talking at you, so my intent here is I'm talking through this, that you guys do interrupt or raise your hands. Okay, the first one, probably no surprise. This is probably the one that drives me the most, but I'm not just raising a child, but the adult he or she will become. And this is what we talked about a few weeks ago. This is framed by my bed. This is in my wall in my office. Because it's constantly thinking about where do I want this student or my child to be a year from now, 2 years from now. Really important is at 18. And remembering that that skill development is going to take time. So with this one, I always say because they need practice, literally thinking about those little feet, but you're not looking at the kid right now in that size 2 or 4 or 5. Picture them. Picture them with those bigger shoes, and that is kind of the drive. With this, I always remind families, this is academic skills, certainly, but this is also social skills and those independent skills, those essential skills they're going to need in life. And again, interrupt at any point. Number 2. Yes, let's go back.
With that one, the phrase boys will be boys has always driven me nuts. I'm always like, no, boys will be men. And so let's hold them to like the standard that we want them to be when they're men.
I love that. And what I love about that, working with teenagers all day, one of the things is I remind myself, it can be part of an explanation, 100%. But it is never an excuse for behavior, and that's the difference. Fill me in. What are all the pieces adding up here to that behavior? It's never an excuse for behavior. Yeah, I like that.
Missy, the week that Laura and I referred to your tagline you have on your email, prepare the child for the path, not the path for the child. What are the consequences when we as
Dad
parents...
just stole number 4, by the way. Just kidding.
Can you speak to the consequences of if we are a parent who's always preparing the path for the child rather than letting them trip, stumble, fall, suffer the consequences of their choices, if we're always rescuing them from that, and what is the outcome?
Mm-hmm. And I am going to save that just for a little bit because
Okay.
I'm going to talk through that one, but I'm going to ask a question back just for you to hold in your head. Probably the biggest thing we need to remember as parents is what if we do that, where will this young person be at 18, 25, 30 when stakes get a lot harder and we're not there to kind of control that situation? So keep that in your head, and I will talk about it.
I think This is also something that I struggle with at times. So we have Mike as our oldest at 9, and then 7 and 5, and sometimes the 5 and 7-year-old do things where it's like, I feel like he should recognize that small potatoes, dude, just leave it be. And I get frustrated with him because I'm holding him to a standard that's probably further along than what he should be. So the boys will be boys will be men, same thing, yes. But at the same time, I think it's really important also, obviously, that you treat them as the age that they are. You can explain further along, but don't expect, them to be able to process as.
Especially with emotion management or some of the pieces.
Yes, I catch
frustration
myself
release.
with that, or she catches me with that quite often. Yeah.
And another piece there too, we always know as families, we're kind of the safe zone. So how he is with his sisters, not right, not an excuse, but it's probably different than if he was playing with those kids on a playground at school, whatever. So finding that balance there. Second one here, and you guys have heard me talk through this one. Every skill our kids are going to learn, every skill we learn kind of tends to go through these 4 stages. First, we're going to do it for them, then we're going to do it with them, and then we need to spend a lot more time on this, watch and give them feedback so that ultimately they are independent someday. The easy example I always talk about is walking across the street. When they're 3 months old, they can't walk yet, so we're holding them and we do it for them. At 13 months, they're starting to walk, but you're going to hold their hand and you're doing it with them. What's crazy is I always say that watch and give feedback is usually needed before we give it. That watch and give feedback really at 5 years old, if your kid is going to cross the street to get to the bus stop to go to elementary school, the goal is at 5, you are sitting on that front stoop and you are giving a ton of feedback there. Whoa, 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 Joey, come back, there's a car to the left. And you are kind of that lighthouse. I'm here, I'm gonna give a lot of that feedback. They come running back across, then they get across safely. And I always joke in the high school at 14, 15 years old, I hope your kid can safely get across the street. What always amazes me, though, is a little bit of that nervousness, laughter of what other skills are we talking about that maybe they can't do independently yet because we haven't thought through these stages. A couple of quotes that always drive me with this in my head, and I think I shared with you guys, I have this crazy bulletin board on my wall at work with a bunch of sticky notes, and there are these common phrases that I use, and so often with students and families, I'll pull one down, and then I'll lay it on the table as we're talking, and then I'll just rewrite another one up there, but there's phrases that go in my head all the time. And there was a book called The Price of Privilege, written by Madeline Levine, and ultimately she had this quote that said, just because you can doesn't mean you should. And so often in parenting, and this sounds harsher than I mean it, but so often in parenting, we do for our kids sometimes because it's easier and faster, right? Like, oh my gosh, you don't have time for you to tie your shoe, let's just go. But a lot of times too, it makes us feel good. And I want you to reflect on that for a minute. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. So often as parents, we make it about us because it does feel good. Well, I can help them. I can make this easier, and we make it about us. But ultimately, what are we robbing them of the practice of doing? A second quote there is, don't do for your kid what they can already do or almost do with a little bit of practice. Because again, now we're just standing in the way and prolonging that development for them to do it independently. In general, I always say, when families get in a conversation about, well, what should he do and what should I help him do in that piece, think for yourself back to that first quote. Any skill that your kid is going to need a year from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now, you've got to ask yourself, they're in the safest environment they're ever going to be to practice these skills. If they need this skill, let them practice it. Another hard part, I think, for parents, and I am guilty of this, is when others give my kid feedback. So when you think about coaches, when you think about teachers, when you think about maybe a family member that loves to raise your kid, but so many times, this village we live in is going to give our kids feedback. Other times, maybe it's a policeman. Maybe it's, bigger thing there. But step out of the way. That feedback is important for your kid to be independent someday. Even though it's hard for us, the power of that feedback for your kid from others just as much as us. I'll give a quick example here. I won't tell you which child because I always feel bad if I throw my kids under the bus. But I had, as I was navigating social media, and a lot of you guys know I've never been on social media, so as a parent and a counselor trying to navigate this world and educate myself, but not be on it. And one of my children started to post pictures that would certainly lead to a certain image about her. Nothing crazy, but my brother at the time said, "Hey, Missy, have you seen this picture, of the child?" And I said, "No, because, again, I'm not on social media." And he says to me, "Well, you should talk to her about it." And I said, "Whoa, whoa, whoa. What do you think's going to happen if I say, 'So your uncle told me and this,' and then I say it to her, it's inappropriate?" One, I'm a messenger there, and two, I am mom. In that moment, do you think I have the loudest voice, or do you think a 250-pound, 6'4" uncle has a loud voice about, "I care enough about you, I'm going to have this conversation with you"? That conversation with her at 16, she will still remember to this day. That was more powerful, that feedback from her uncle about that moment versus passing it along to mom or dad. And yes, I was hoping that would trigger something.
I feel like this one's interesting. I feel like in house, we let our kids speak as independent as we can with a lot of things. But what's interesting is when we're not in the house, just the feedback we get from other people. Like Simon's 9, he wants to ride his bike around the neighborhood. We strap a little walkie-talkie to him in case he crashes or whatever. But having someone literally be like, he's not safe, and he's just riding on the sidewalk. And people make you feel afraid. So I feel like sometimes it's hard to let him do some of those other skills. I could ride across my hometown, granted I only have one stoplight, but I could ride across my hometown to my friend's house on my bike by the time I was Simon's age without anything. And I think it's interesting how that shift has kind of happened where keep your kids close, something's going to happen to them. I feel like I see a lot of that in my job and just in general where kids aren't allowed to go out and do what we did when we were their age.
In some of the books, I'm so glad you brought this up, just the essence of raising life-ready kids. There's so much research out there now of as parents, our kids are in physically the most safe environment, safer than any generation before us. But why does it not feel that way? Why do we feel like it's a dangerous
every
world?
single thing that happens. You have access to what happened in Missouri, and you're hearing about what happened to the kid in Missouri, where before you wouldn't know about that shit.
You're hearing about it, and you're hearing about it 24/7, all day, every day. That's when this shift started to happen. So one of the things I always talk about at the high school level is use real statistics in your community to help you make decisions as parents. So look in Crystal Lake. And as you educate your kids, one of the things with the whole cell phone, and I won't go off on this tangent, but this is hard to hear, but when we say, hey, they need a cell phone to be safe, and especially, hey, they need a cell phone to be safe in schools, two things I say. One, you've just told your kid that they are unsafe. And two, you believe as a parent, as long as they have a cell phone, I can keep them safe. Neither one of those are true. And that's hard to digest, and then I could go on and on about this. But I like Rachel's point of, you guys are living in a world where your neighbors are gonna have opinions. Your friends through social media have opinions. You are getting opinions up the wazoo of, is that safe for Simon? I'm not sure.
Well, and I think too, we have actually had someone who was on a walk videotape what was happening in our front yard because Sarah was having a tantrum, and I was like, "You can use your outside voice here, I don't care."
Yeah,
and someone started videotaping us and telling me that it was neglectful. Then I'm like, what happens if she sends that to somebody? She's literally just laying in the yard screaming. She's not, nobody's hurt. It was just wild to me that someone else is using, again, a phone to try to make us not safe. This is insane.
Just quick show of hands, and I won't ask you to share, but who has felt like a decision you made, hopefully at this, but a decision you made, somebody, family member, friend, neighbor, there was some opinion there. Mm-hmm. Right? Yes. And that's where what drives me is what skill do I ultimately want them to have? One of the things this research is showing is we physically have them safer because they're in our house and they're not doing any of these things, and yet emotionally they're not. And the catch there. Yeah, go ahead.
So I have a funny based off that. One of my old bosses posted, of all the things we are more cautious about now compared to when we were kids, I've never taken my kids to check their candy for razor blades and needles at the fire station.
Right?
Which I think is funny.
Yes.
That's more along the lines of the riding a bike across the street.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's wild how it's changed. And then also I want to reflect back on the feedback from your uncle. Like, I think that what's really important as they get older, and especially as they have more feedback, especially coming from like coaches. You know, their teachers they're gonna be super comfortable with, but like coaches are gonna go in and out of their lives for like 2 or 3 months. And the older that they get, the more intense the competition gets and the more, frankly, into it the coaches get. And I think it's really important to let your kids know, like, they're in the moment too, they're emotional about it, they're gonna care about you. And as soon as we see something that goes across the line, that's when we'll step in. But other than that, like, they may give you some high intensity like feedback because they want you to get better. You know, and like, there's so many kids that I have coached that by the high school level are just not prepared to hear any type of criticism or any type of feedback that's not positive in accordance with their ability in athletics. And it's like that's really hard, and so just educating your kids about like, hey, you're good at things, you're not good at things, people care about you, they're trying to get you better at things, and so
Andrew is doing a nice lead-in into this next one.
We
Like,
planned
we'll talk
that.
about this. It's like I paid Don, I paid Andrew. Yeah, go ahead.
Say too, like when I used to grade papers for a professor, and one of the things he used to tell me is like, you gotta do the compliment sandwich. So you do like a little bit of positive criticism, then positive to end it. And I'm like, yeah, it works, but
It's a lot of work.
I don't think about that sometimes. Like, I just say,
Easier grading papers than in the
That's
moment.
because you're doing math.
This is like writing like more philosophical things. And, yeah.
Yeah, and kind of that 3-to-1 parenting thing I gave you guys, when you build that respect and rapport there, then that criticism or feedback's a little easier to take. To Andrew's point, this is my third one. When they struggle, and they will, provide them more practice, not less. And the easiest one to kind of do an analogy here is sports, but I'll give you a few. Who in here has kids who play sports? Okay, someone name a sport for me. Baseball. So in baseball, if your son or daughter couldn't hit the ball, in general, at a young age, that coach isn't going to say, don't worry about it, Simon, you don't have to sit on the bench. No, they're going to use that time. If Simon is struggling with baseball, what's that coach going to do? He's going to set up the tee and the net, and he's going to say, I want you to hit 5 times more than that other kid to grow in that skill. Anybody in here have a kid who plays an instrument? So my kids took piano lessons, and I can tell you, Mrs. Taylor, if they ever struggled on a little bit of the piece, what did she do? She didn't say skip over that part. You don't have to do that. She said, this week, all I want you to do is that part of the piece. Next week, we'll try to put it back in there. And a really easy way to look at this, anybody in here ever go to the dentist? Anybody go to the dentist, and sometimes when they floss your teeth, your gums bleed? The dentist doesn't say, don't worry about it, Angela, you can stop flossing. What does the dentist say? Well, floss more, right? And we forget this. When they struggle, they will, because to Andrew's point, for skill development, they're going to struggle. They're learning a new skill. Here, I love the book, not anything earth-shattering other than the coin-framed successful failures. When they struggle, when they fail, the whole goal of that is they are learning. They're taking a lesson from their failure. They are going to learn, adapt, grow, and be better at what it is they're doing. If you guys think for a second about the things you are most proud of, I'm going to argue it's probably not something that just happened overnight. It are the things that you put time in. Anybody read that book, Outliers? It's 10,000 hours that lead to that success. This is also where I love to remind us, and I'm going to say this a couple times, kids are anti-fragile. Anybody remember what that means?
resilience.
Right? Anti-fragile. They actually need that stressor, that curveball in order to adapt, grow, and develop. So we're going to get to number 4, which Don kind of cued me on, but they need that to do better at it. So if they have this skill that they want to do better at and or they're going to need in life, don't ask them not to do it. Have them do it 10 times more to get that practice.
Well, I think too, giving that like authentic, actual feedback and not just coddling, as we've kind of talked about, oh, you're doing great. If it's wrong, tell them it's wrong. you know?
Right.
I think that sandwich or do whatever you want, but make sure they know it's wrong.
Yes. Well, now, and then the thing I always say with this one is, how do they know their current system isn't working if you don't give them that feedback? Great, now we've just set them up. No, just keep doing what you're doing great, and they're not going to be successful at it.
Like when you have siblings too, they'll be like, well, why do I have to work at this when this other kid doesn't have to do it? And I think it's kind of like the best policy is to be honest, be like, well, it's hard for you right now, and like when it's not hard, then you don't have to work as hard. Like everyone has things that they need to work more on.
And really powerful right there, especially with siblings, is asking that one, what are you really good at? I want you to stop for a second and tell me what you're really good at. Get in a conversation about why are you good at it, what's led to that, and now say, okay, so this thing's hard over there. You know, I always talk about like non-preferred tasks. Like, this is harder for you, but then we know at a very young age you can start to math. It was hard for me, so then I didn't like math, and then it got harder, and I wasn't putting in the time in that. But for them to stop and reflect, what are you good at? What do you do to be good at that? And then carry it over here. Yeah, so you need a little more practice
I
here.
think that movies kind of have that anti-message because it's like, you know, even in the new Star Wars where it's like, oh, she just has these natural talents and all you have to do is just realize who you are and you never have to work at anything. And so I think it's so frustrating when you're trying to teach that message.
Mm-hmm. No, I definitely agree.
I think this applies not just to like an actual like hands-on skill, but like socially as well. And I'm gonna call Julia out because it was beautiful. It was beautiful. We went trick-or-treating with the Bermudas and they had dinner with us, and I'm just like, it got really silent in the house for a second, and my first instinct was, I have to go see what's going on because somebody is clearly murdering somebody. And then she's like, oh no, I heard noise, we're fine, everything's fine. I was like, okay, Julia's calm, I'm home. But I just feel like letting them figure it out themselves. I just apologize for that because I watch it happen at my house. It's beautiful, and just I don't know. I feel like there are a lot of times where parents feel the need to like step in or like. I don't know. I see it at work too, where they're like, well, I'm going to call the school, and I'm going to call this other parent, and I'm going to do this. I'm like, hold up, wait, we don't even know what happened. And it just makes things more complicated, and they don't learn how to solve it on the playground.
And we're going to talk a little bit about this too. I love that example. You know, like when we were raised, in general, our parents didn't worry unless they heard a scream, the police called, something. Somewhere in this,
It was so calm.
and somewhere in this shift, our parenting, there's a lot more parents like you, Rachel, that it's the opposite. Unless I hear from them, unless I see they're okay, unless I'm constantly worrying.
Well, and here's a really good thing that I can remember is like, remember the commercials? It's like, it's 10 o'clock, you know where your kids are?
Right.
It's because they were just,
Yes.
you know, it's like,
Yes.
do your thing.
And that is, I shared this a couple weeks ago, but that's where I cringe at this new commercial that the mom and dad are looking over their phone and they've got like maybe a 10, 11-year-old girl and they're like, is she there yet? Is she there yet? And they're feeding off of each other, and then you see the doorbell ring and this girl's clearly going to her best friend's house and they're like, oh, she's there. Look at the shift in that parenting and what that's doing to us. Yes. All right, here's Don's. Oh, nope, not yet. Sorry. Don's is next. It's not my problem to fix. I've talked about this before, but there's a lot of research right now that this culture of young people that we are raising has this Cinderella syndrome. I'm just waiting for someone to step in and fix this, make this more comfortable, make this easy on myself. And there's two things that happen when we do that. One, we send the message to our kid, I don't think you can do that. And two, the worst thing we do is we rob them of the practice of doing it. And this is a little bit with emotion management too. With this, a couple things I always talk about. Never say this out loud. When your kid comes in, it's not, well, this is not my problem to fix. Just in your head, it does help reset me. And this is me as a counselor, and this is me as a parent. Whenever a kid comes in, whether it's my child or a student, first thing I said, it's not my problem to fix. And I just say it in my head to reset and redefine what my role is for them in that moment. A couple things, and this is always hard. One of the quotes I love is, remember, your child doesn't have to solve a problem to be okay. And sit with that for a second. If your kid is coming to you, if your student is coming to you and they are in a problem, say in your head, they can be okay and still have this problem on their plate. So often as parents, we hear a problem come in, and what do? We want to help them solve it right away. With this, I always say there's kind of three things. A little easier in my counselor role with this, but the first one, I am pretty good at just sitting in it. but that's my training. That's what I knew. And I remember at a very young age, my oldest said, I love that you listen without getting involved, because it's easier as a counselor, but just be present in it. Here's kind of the good news as a parent. If your kid is coming to you with a problem, 90% of the battle is already done. Your kid trusts you. Your kid is keeping that door open. You're doing a lot right if your kid is coming to you. But here's where the first thing I want you to do is bite your tongue. They might just be coming to you to vent. Think about that as spouses when we just want to vent. But just be present with it. Let them sit in it, and remember, it can stink, it can suck, and they can still be okay. But then, if they're struggling and they want help, there's kind of two roles here, and these are different. The first one is true coping. Who does the work in coping? The person, right? My kid. And then there's support. Who tends to do the work in support? Me, right? So first, be present in it. We kind of are working backwards here. Second, if they're having a difficult time, a strong emotion there, then it's that coping. And coping has two parts. Our kids have got to get better, and we're the role models here, of building in daily habits that help them feel calm. So think for yourself in your life. Maybe it's your shower at night or your face routine. Maybe it's working out. Maybe it's reading. I know Mike and I were talking about long walks and the benefit of exercise. But our kids need daily habits, a couple of them that they do every day, where that is when they're their calmest and at peace. They also need those in-the-moment ones. When I am throwing that fit, what is it that they're going to do to help that emotion management? We'll talk about emotions here in just a second. But redefine what support is. If you've sat in it with them, they've tried some coping, and now they really are, I need help with this. Your role as a supporter is to listen with the intent of understanding, being empathetic and just stepping in their shoes, validating their emotions, and I'm going to argue a lot of times we're actually helping them name emotions. And then third, ask open-ended questions. Don't fix it for them. Don't tell them, have you been here before? What's worked? Do you want some ideas? Give them 3, not 1. But that's what this looks like. Number 5, DOMS. Prepare the child for the path, not the path for the child. And this is in my email signature page because I live by this and I have to remind myself every day. What does this look like? This is when we change conditions for our kid to be happy, for our kid to be more comfortable, for our kid, and you fill in that blank there. Some examples of these. Switching a schedule so they have elementary school class with friends that they know. Teacher changes, lunch to be with friends. I'm going to talk about this one really fast because I know we're going to run out of time here. But transfers, as your kids get older and they struggle, so often we want to sweep in and change this condition. And when we do this, what we do is we ultimately, again, tell our kid, well, we don't think you can handle this. We're going to step in and change it. But the worst part for me as a counselor and a parent is now I leave them ill-prepared. You think life is going to be that easy on them? When they leave our houses, life gets harder. Really quick story with my oldest, who, of course, 11 friends were going to Prairie Ridge. She was going to go to Crystal Lake Central, and that was the worst thing in a 14-year-old's eyes, to the point where other parents got involved. It was a very rough 8th grade summer, and then beginning of high school. And to make a very long story short, I knew this in my head, but my heart didn't. It was awful. So that first morning, I go to dropping my daughter off at Central. She's crying, and of course I'm crying because I'm a mom and a counselor. And it's one of those awkward, she's looking at me and she's like, what, I'm just supposed to walk in there and say, will you be my friend? Hope it goes great. So drop her off. It took, you guys, and it still gives me goosebumps and makes me emotional. It took till day 8 where she looked at me. She still every morning was crying, and so was I. But day 8 where she said, thanks for knowing I can do this. She didn't yet know it. It was a rough freshman year, but it was that consistent, I'm going to keep dropping you off. I'm going to keep picking you up, and we're going to keep talking about this. It ended up being her college essay. You think she wasn't going to be in a situation again where she didn't know other people? That's going to happen to them a million times in life. All I would have done was left her ill-prepared if I postponed that. But other examples, times when we ask for due dates to be changed, lowering the bar, the expectations, asking anyone to change things so our kids are more comfortable, happier, life is easier for them. All we do is leave them ill-prepared. Again, we already talked about this, but them being anti-fragile. And sometimes, too, the biggest part for a parent is stepping out of the way. If that is hard for you, I literally mean this. Step into the other room. Step out of it so that we don't get involved in trying to make this easier for them. I do want to read very fast. This is a book I've referenced a couple times about how to raise an adult. Strongly encourage this book. It's funny. She does just a great job. But I just want to read a few of these that through the book Gist, they say every kid should experience. Not being invited to a birthday party, experiencing the death of a pet, working hard on a paper and still getting a poor grade, having a car breakdown away from home, being told that a class or camp is full, getting detention, being blamed for something he didn't do, having an event canceled because someone else misbehaved, being fired, and it goes on, and this is the most important phrase. Not only must you let your kids experience these things, you must appreciate their importance. And that's the piece there. All right, I'm going to keep moving us. I could do this for 2 hours. Okay, don't blur the lines. I can make this one fast because we talked about this 2 weeks ago when I was talking about morals and values. The big thing with don't blur the lines for me is it is hard being a parent. It is hard for me to decide what rules should I have, what expectation should I have of my kid, and we have to do that all day, every day. So when someone else has come up with a rule, a policy, a law, oh my gosh, breathe for a parent and say, thank goodness they had to come up with it. Now I just have to remind my kid that rule is there. You're going to follow it. That expectation is there. So one is it's kind of a break for a parent, which is nice, even when you don't necessarily agree with it. You're teaching your kid there are going to be rules and policies and laws out there. But the second piece, and the don't blur the lines piece, is this is a developing brain. You guys all know mid-20s, they're going to be outside of your house by the time their brain is fully developed. So don't blur the lines is more about don't put your kid in a situation where it's up to them to decide, is this when I should follow it or am I okay not to follow it there? This is a developing brain. Their brain, and it is hard, is really relying on what? Impulse and emotion to make decisions. So anytime there's that rule, law, policy, teach them. You just follow it. This comes into play, and these are some hard ones, but with coaches' rules and expectations. Even if you don't agree with them, that's the coach's rules. Teachers' rules or expectations, school expectations, driving laws, laws around alcohol, all of those things, someone else's rule or policy is there. Help your kid's developing brain just say, yep, it's what it is. Number 7, change doesn't require motivation. It requires routine, discipline, and structure. And this is one of the things, I love the giggles.
The lines, I found out the hard way that when our oldest was able to see from the back seat the speedometer.
They'll call you out too, don't they? You know what? Sometimes there's some really humbling moments as a parent, and kind of back to why you don't have to follow that rule, Mommy. But yeah, right? They will call you out too. And again, easier said than done, but kind of being who we want our child to become. Oh, there's some really humbling moments in life as they get older. This one comes in because how often when you think about chores, expectations you have in your house, if your kids are school age, schoolwork, there's this idea, and if I got $1 for every time I had a kid or a parent say, well, he's just not motivated. I say, it's great news. This is a sticky note I use on a weekly basis with families. The good news, they don't need motivation. And here's something I just want to read a quick somebody shared it with me off of Instagram about motivation. Motivation, and I literally share this in emails with parents, motivation is the friend who shows up to the party but doesn't answer the phone when you need to talk about something heavy. Discipline is your ride or die who is always there for you even when things get tough and uncomfortable. It's okay to use motivation when it's there, but it's flaky, so don't rely on it. Build a close relationship with discipline so that you stay the course even when you feel like giving up. So the thing I say here, the kind of the special sauce, is time and place. When your kid doesn't want to do a chore, when they can't find the motivation to do a chore or that schoolwork or whatever that expectation, work on the baseball skills, create a time and a place for your kid. And as they get older, let them be a part of that, but it ultimately comes down to structuring unstructured time. You know when to show up for bedtime, you know when to show up for math class or your job, or you know all these things. Time and place are going to be the magic for this kid. If they are not cleaning the bathroom and they're supposed to, now it becomes, Sarah, you're going to clean the bathroom, and let them at their age come up with a day and time, especially in regards to schoolwork. What day and time will I see you at that kitchen table to do that math homework? What day and time would you like to clean the bathroom? And I always talk about motivation, the funny thing there, and I will literally use the toilet. I am not motivated to clean the 2 toilets in the house, but I know every Sunday around 1 o'clock, I go to church, I go eat my lunch, and then it's lovely toilet time. So have your example ready for your kid. You think I'm motivated for this? It would never get done. It's a time and a place, and structuring that unstructured time really is the way to help your kids stick to it.
On that, you mentioned a couple of weeks ago, in the midst of getting them to do something they have to do, the lessening the confrontations, giving them options.
Yes.
So you can do it here or here. You come up with the plan, but
Yep.
they take ownership of it. It's
Yep.
not so much dictating.
And really, then your role becomes that mentor, or what I like to say, accountability partner. You told me 3 o'clock on Tuesday. So I'm just going to be there to give you feedback. Did you show up to do that at 3 o'clock on Tuesday? But other than that, I can't remind them, which is really hard. I can't stay on them. They pick the day and time, and you're just that accountability partner. Number 8, all emotions are useful. So who in here saw Inside Out 1 or 2? Of course, my favorite movies. What's the moral of Inside Out?
We need them all.
Yes, right? Joy realized that sadness, like Riley needed all of those emotions. And then, second question, what happens so often with all those uncomfortable emotions? Riley was kind of sitting up in a tree and they were reflecting on this. Do you guys remember? I didn't see this one. So this was where her friends came, her family came, all of these other positive things came out of when she was feeling these other emotions. But the power here, and this is something I teach kids all day, every day. Emotions, there are 3 things that we need to teach kids. 1, an emotion is temporary. Just like a wave, it's going to come and go. And this is powerful at a very young age. It's a temporary emotion that Sarah's feeling on the front lawn, right? 2, that it is functional. Every emotion your kid is going to feel, every emotion you feel does serve a function. And there's a big difference here. I always say it's not a fire alarm that says, get the heck out of here. It's just an alarm clock, a nice $14.99 alarm clock that says, wake up. Your body's telling you something. And then the third thing is that it is manageable. And how I manage my emotions is going to be different than Rachel. That's different than Chris. That's different than Andrew. And so the power is to your child, it's temporary. It's going to come and go. It is serving a function. What do we think it's telling your body? And then 3, we've got to figure out how do you use that emotion and then manage it. Easier said than done for sure. But those are the 3 things our kids need to learn about emotions. And a lot of times adults need to learn about emotions too. With this, I always get the question kind of what is the role for the adult? The adult has some important jobs here. First of all, I'm going to say I think so often in this generation, especially teenagers, they feel 2 emotions. What 2 emotions do you think I hear the most often in my office? Mrs. Berg, I am
Victimhood, I would guess.
depressed and anxious, right? And then I quickly followed up, well, good news, depression's not an emotion. It is a disability. Anxiety is an emotion and a disability. But their vocabulary is so lacking here. We've got to get better at renaming emotions for our kids. And this is a great use of books and movies. What do you think, and a very powerful thing if your kids are still younger, pictures. What emotion do you think they're feeling? Because our kids are getting really bad at this at the older age. So redefine. If they say they're anxious, which is such a common word now, you're feeling overwhelmed. Are you feeling overloaded? Are you feeling stressed? Give them different terms.
I actually don't think anxious is a very common word. I think anxiety is. And whenever
100%.
kids tell me they have anxiety, I'm like, I actually think that you're misusing that word and you're actually you're
right.
anxious. And guess what? This morning before I started teaching this lesson, I was anxious. And I plowed through and look, everything's great. It just gets me so fired up because anxiety is 20-fold what it was 5 years ago. It's unbelievable.
It's like this bad word. And I said, great, you're feeling anxious. It's in all of us. Normalize that emotion. But to Andrew's point, like give it another name. Yeah, I'm stressed right now. It's the first time I'm giving this AP Stats lesson. But using vocabulary, renaming that vocabulary is really important for kids. The second thing for adults is really encouraging how are they going to identify it and manage it? And so going back to those coping skills and having daily habits, what are kind of those daily habits they use and in those moments? The hardest one as a parent, what do you think I'm going to say? Role model, role model, role model. Talk every day. I was really stressed at work today and this is how I handled it. I didn't handle this well. I think I need to think. But stories in the news, stories in books, stories in movies, give them examples as they're trying to figure out. Because the only way, and I always say this to parents, the only way your kid is going to figure out how to manage emotions themselves is what? Do you think it's going to be someone telling them? No, it's going to be fudging through it, right? Like, I got to figure this out. And Sarah's going to figure out that, you know what, sometimes I do need 2 minutes to kind of scream this out, eventually, hopefully in a pillow or whatever, not the front lawn. I'll share a very quick story for you. I lost my brother in January, and it's been really hard, and I still tear up. But my mom and I just had this conversation about grief is a tough emotion and how to work through that. So has anybody in here saw the Apple TV show Shrinking? You don't need to see it, I'll tell you that. But there's this moment in it where they talk about the hard 10-minute cry. So this is Confessions of Missy Berg. But every morning I have a certain song right now. It's The Walls by Lumineers, who redid this Tom Petty song. And I have a hard 10-minute cry. I listen to it twice and I cry. And then I'm like, okay, and here I go. But your kid needs to feel these emotions and then practice these different strategies to figure out what's right for them, because it's not going to be what works for you. I will tell you that. So don't rob them of the emotion. The worst thing we can do is if they're feeling an intense and comfortable emotion and we step in, you do not want to shut that emotion off, because right now what's happening, especially when kids are feeling anxious, is they're like, this is so uncomfortable. The last time I was here, mom or social worker or counselor stepped in and they fixed it for me. Please fix this for me. We knew when we grew up what happened. We sat in that and we got to see the other side of it. Maybe, I just go back, but it's so far back, maybe it was just being present with it. And like a wave, it came and went. And other times there was things we did. The error we're making as a parents and adults in these kids' lives is we step in and shut that off. So now every time they feel that emotion, they're scared. They're like, well, I didn't see the other side of this until someone stepped in. So let them feel it. And then if they need some help, what do you want to try next time? Okay, that was 10 minutes on the lawn, probably not comfortable. What do you want to try next time? Here's some ones that I've seen, or in this book, or in this story. Number 9, establish no tech zones. We don't have to go real deep into this because we talked about this a few weeks ago when we talked about morals and values. I like that Jill kind of shared, hey, we're not using the cell phone as an alarm anymore. I talked about 4 no tech zones, these times in your day that you intentionally aren't on technology or your kids aren't on technology. The ones I talked about were academic spaces, and that's both in school and in that homework time. I said 1, this is to help them practice and develop focus, organization, time management skills, all of these skills that they're going to need. The good news is our generation of kids can't focus right now, but that's really fixable. They need to practice focus, just like they do these other skills. But it's also to allow for practice of grit, perseverance, problem solving, and then, of course, that brain development. And we talked kind of about white and gray matter. A second one, which I'm going to argue, even as a high school counselor, is still my number 1, no technology in the bedrooms. This is an easy one for me. 1, as your kid gets older and they start to have these devices, and very normal is they're going to be with friends more and they're going to be outside of your house more, you have very little time as you start to raise teenagers with your kids. So get them out of their bedroom. You want to run into your kid. You want them to come up for air. So I always say in the bedroom, you increase this, not being in the bedroom, you increase connection, they come up for air, I get to lay eyes on them. Long ago when technology came out, they said, hey, you need to monitor what they're on. I'm going to take that a step further. You need to monitor your kid. When you're constantly walking by and you're seeing facial expressions, are they tearful? Are they upset? What's going on? You know something in that content is probably not good for your kid. But the other thing is to practice and fortify those coping strategies. Kids are gonna rely on technology for coping if they can, and I will tell you all the data is there, they're not. They're either scrolling and not managing the problems and they have this big build, or what do? They jump on and then social comparison, they see everybody else's life is great when mine is not. They talk about social media being an intensifier. So whatever my mood is in the moment, when I go to social media, that is what I'm gonna find. So if they're sad, if they're upset, if they're feeling any emotion that's uncomfortable, technology is not where they want to find the fix. And then the last thing is sleep. Bedrooms should be where they walk across the threshold of that bedroom and it's like, my body relaxes, not the dopamine hit in the high. Third one, junctions. These natural times in your day where you guys are going to run into each other, these are positive. You will get fewer and fewer of them as they get older. This is for them to practice that communication, the nonverbals, all of the tone, fluctuation, eye contact, the pieces of communication when I'm looking at someone versus a device. But also, this is a great place to foster connection. It is okay that you don't have 3 hours with your kid. These smaller doses of 10 to 15 minutes are very powerful, lots of them. And also your chance to kind of continue to develop that character. The less time they spend with you, the less influence you have out of that. So take advantage of those. And then the front seat of the car. This is communication in a whole different sense. This is that small talk. This is that boredom. This is that look out the window. This is sometimes the safest place for your kid to say something, because they're not looking at you and you're not looking at them, and kind of test the waters, your response for them to keep going with it. But it also fosters that connection. This is a place for them to sit for a few minutes before they go from school to practice to this to this. Let them just sit. Last one here. We are going to make it through here. The power of a release point. I taught a class one summer, a couple summers ago, and I talked about the release point. This is your time to use your village. The power of the release point is really back to, there's these times in your day when they are very young. This might be when the babysitter comes for an hour or 2 hours. This might be when you first drop off for preschool for an hour and a half a couple times a week, eventually kindergarten, and then school and practices and all these release points. And there's two really important things with release points. One, this is as the adult, my time I am saying, I completely trust you, and I'm going to walk away. This is where I think the world of technology gets a little gray, and I'd like to make it more black and white. This is where nanny cams come out, and while I'm babysitting, I got a camera on so I know at all times my kid is safe. This is where when they go to preschool, there's now cameras, or how often are the teachers taking pictures and posting that. This is in schools. As long as they have a phone on them, I can call them at all times. When they get upset about that math class, they're reaching out to me. Release points are practice for you as a parent to say, you are separate from me. Go. The good news is they're going to come back to you. So you've got all of these years where, okay, there's an hour, okay, there's 2 hours, now there's 5 hours. I trust you people. Your kid is going to come back. But the second thing is for your kid's sake. This is their time to be separate from you. You don't know anything about that hour, that 2 hours, that 5 hours. There's a quote that I love from this book, but it is, I am a fly on a wall I was never meant to be in. You think about how you grew up and you guys had these release points. Parents aren't supposed to know everything going on when your kid is separate from you. Teaching them that separation while they're still coming home to you every night is going to be very powerful. The second part of that is use your village. Again, use your village. Surround yourself with sports, activities, school, people that are in your kids' lives where they still get to come home and then talk through that with you, ultimately fortifying morals, values, character, all those things when they're at 18 years old. Okay, we've got a minute left here. I did not leave us time, of course. With the homework, the good news for you, I don't get to ask you about this next week, so whether you do it or not, I don't know. But think about a phrase, and for some of you guys, I knew I'd run out of time, but I kind of Googled the top 10 parenting Bible verses. Maybe it's a Bible verse. Maybe it is one of the phrases we just talked about. But think about a phrase that can help kind of reset you, drive you when you're in that moment. You keep reflecting back on, I live by sticky notes. They're written on my wall. They're framed by my bed. Like surround you. Commit to one that's going to be good for you, and then put it around you. I do know Don wants me to let you guys know that next week starts the Gospel of Luke. Anything you wanted to add or highlight there at all, Don?
No, but we did the Gospel of John earlier, and this will be, we're doing all 4 Gospels this year, so this is the second of our 4.
Okay.
Andrew's kicking us off next week, and so yeah, we'll get started with that.
Keep coming.
Yep.
Keep coming.
And the book you were going to offer?
Yes, this was the book that the series was based off of. I always give it back to Don. He kind of has a library, so if anybody wants to borrow this. I will say this is a book I do think is good. This is a book for anybody who is starting the talk of technology, even if you're kind of in it. What I like about this one is some good, what might be the question that your kid asks, why does mommy get it, not me? It might be a question that a lovely neighbor asks because they disagree with our parenting, but there's just it's an easy read and some good strategies in there. The one thing with this, I will say, if you ever want to get a cup of coffee or a cup of tea and kind of talk through, I love these pieces. I am not an expert. I made a million mistakes, but I just love the topic of parenting and kind of working through this. So if I can ever help with anybody, at least talk it out, you let me know. Yes, I intentionally did that. Yes, and use it. I mean it. Okay, I will close this in prayer to get you guys out of here. Thank you, God, for being with us over the past 6 weeks as we reflected and discuss strategies to help us be more confident parents. Please continue to guide us and help us to reflect on the topics covered in this 6-week series, using adapting our family patterns from our upbringing, the lesson of the Shema and the Sabbath, the importance of communication and discipline, building morals and values, the lesson of the blessing, and verses that can remind us of our role as a parent. May we keep you at the center of our parenting. In God's name we pray. Amen. And thank you all so much.